All right, so like I said, this isn't necessarily meant to be something that you guys are going to use. This is more of just ideas for what a platform would end up looking like using ACM libraries. And so we're just going to be going over some concepts, and I'm going to be starting straight from scratch. So you're going to see me kind of go through everything in the progression on how we're going to end up looking at some of these things. So first things first is we're just going to end up making a run. I'm going to end up making, for right now, let's just go ahead and make a grect, call it rect, grect, and then we'll just kind of put it at 100, 100, 200, right? And then we're just going to add that rect. And then next thing I'm also going to do is just have an init function, and that's just to kind of help me set the size of the screen to try and make this size a little bit bigger in our situation. So because I think this monitor is has a little bit crazier of a resolution. I'm just going to say something like set size, and why don't we go ahead and be good people and not use actual numbers, but have a program width and a program height. I'll define as constants up at the top. So I think, let me hover over and see if I can have Eclipse do this for me. Yep, we can. It's great. I'm going to do that there. And then we'll say program width. Let's go ahead and have it be 1,000. And program height, let's go ahead and have that be like 750 or something. And then again, we're starting small. You're going to see me kind of run things a lot as we go through. Obviously, it's saying that it can't find a bunch of things, so I'm just going to use Control-Shift-O to hopefully get it to import everything. And let me fix the project setup because I think I might not have ACM. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so because ACM is not part of this. Oh, that's the other thing. Why do I have this? Let me move this over here to default package. That shouldn't be there. And then let's also just fix the project. So anytime that you're doing the ACM jar, you could just, as long as you have the folder right, there is the ACM jar down here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the ACM jar right here, select it, and then hit apply and close. Okay, so now that we have that, now I should be able to do the organize imports, and then they'll go ahead and bring that stuff in there. And so again, this is more of a sanity check, right? Let's see, so it's not letting me do that. I think it might be set preferred size. Set. I forget, I'm gonna just do a set and then do the control space here, see what it comes up with. I'll do it again, it just took a little bit of time. Oh, ooh, let's have that ignore. It's gonna be some video. All right, so we should have something down here that's like, I'm gonna have the size, set size. Oh yeah, see, oh, because I had a string. Yeah, you can totally see that as I'm going through. You're kind of also getting this way of how I end up programming, or as I'm doing things late at night on a lack of sleep. Okay, so then we'll keep going. Let's go ahead and run. And you can see that it is giving me kind of this window here, right? Obviously it's not a super huge window, but that's fine. Okay, so we're good there, right? You guys are okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so then let's go ahead. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add the key listeners, okay? Because really, that's going to end up doing most of the key listeners. So it is. Yep. And then now what I'm going to do is that's going to allow me to be able to respond to keyboard presses. So I'm going to use that override thing, and I'm going to override the function public void key pressed key event key. Okay. And then here, what it's doing is it's just like mouse pressed, except that we're doing keyboard pressing. So anytime a keyboard's pressed, we're going to end up being inside of this method. And so here, what I'm going to do is I want to check if e.get key code equals key event dot vk, and I'm going to just say left. Okay. Put a parentheses up here. And we're going to make our character, and I'm also going to do some refactoring here. So now that we have it, we're going to make this instance variable up here. And then just go ahead and take that part out there. And then we'll go ahead and come down here, and then we'll say rec.move. And let's go ahead and also say something like we're going to move by negative speed. And again, apologies. Working with a different keyboard, and so now I'm trying to relearn everything. And then again, yeah, we'll just make the constant up here. Make sure, okay, good, that it has the integer. And we'll say maybe the speed is, we'll make it 10 pixels right now. Okay. So let's go ahead and try this out, just to see if we press the left key, if it will actually work. Oh, the other thing I should do is request focus. It doesn't always work. What it's essentially doing is trying to say, go ahead and make me active, so that way I don't have to press the click button. I also ended up just doing imports again. And let's go ahead and we have that. So let me just try and run now. Okay, so now we're here. I'm going to go ahead and try and press the left. Obviously, it's not working. Let me go ahead and click here, and we can see that it now is working to the left.
It's not showing up on the video.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so let me stop the share for a second, and then let me do share screen. Oh, this is the dangerous thing where it's going to show the entire screen. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to continue there. Okay, so now, once again, we'll do that. We'll have that there. We'll try that. And then we have it here, and and I do actually have to click on it. It's not going to let me do it. So once I click on it, then it goes ahead and shows it. Okay. So any questions so far?
I don't have any.
Pretty, yeah. So this is all pretty still, pretty much the, what you guys would be doing. So let me go ahead and just do this at this point over here with this, right? Where we have this, and then now rather than having negative speed, we can have positive speed. And obviously this wouldn't be very good, but let's go ahead and we'll start with this, run it again. And just make sure that we have, both sides that we're doing, right? So obviously right now you could see that it kind of hangs, right? That once I start pressing that key, right, you could see that it takes a little bit of time, and then as soon as I release it, it kind of just immediately stops, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily want to have something like that, right? We're gonna, sorry, I want to also bring this down some. Let me make another constant here. So just get extra constant. We're going to call it floor y. And floor y, xy with height. Yeah, so let's say that floor y is actually going to be something like, if we made the height 600, 700, let's say that it's going to be like 600. If our square, we should probably also make the square not as big. Size. We will replace all 200s there. That way it does that, and then we'll make this maybe 100. And let's go ahead and do a rec.setFilled. Make it more fill color, just to kind of make things exciting. Okay, do the imports, and then run. Always save, always save. Okay, so we have an error. Color.red, it should be color.red, red. And now we have something more exciting here that again still ends up doing this thing, but now we kind of have this floor. Do you guys agree? It kind of feels a little bit more like a floor down here.
Yeah.
You got a platformer? Okay. So let's go ahead and really, I think the jumping and sort of this movement kind of go, they both have the same feel to them. And so what I'm going to do is, instead of actually saying every time I click on the mouse, every time that I press a key, I want to move a particular amount, right? What I want to do instead is possibly to have something where I'm saying, as soon as I press the key, go ahead and kind of allow me to go in a particular direction. And then once I release that key, I want to kind of maybe stop. Does that make sense? How we're changing this code a little bit? So what I'm doing here is I'm going to say, when I'll just kind of do the same. I'm going to kill a kitten right now, and apologies. Right, if we end up saying something like that, maybe so what I'm going to do here instead, okay, and this is where we start getting into the ideas of having physics and the like, is that we're going to create two variables over here. I'm going to call them, I'm going to make them doubles, and I'm going to call them dx and dy. Okay. And initially, dx and dy should be set to 0. Now what I'm going to do is I want to essentially tell the computer that once I press a particular movement, rather than me kind of calling move each time that the key is pressed, as soon as they press it the first time, I want to go ahead and just have it launch in whichever direction it's talking about, right? So what we're going to do here is rather than move the rectangle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say dx equals, if I want to go to the left, dx equals negative speed, okay? Otherwise, if we were going to go to the right, dx equals speed. Similarly, when we release the key, I can perhaps say something like dx equals 0, and dy, the same thing here. It's like dx is also equal to 0. And we'll keep these here like this for right now, because we might change them in a little bit. And so what we're going to do now is, this isn't going to change. All this is doing is changing this dx variable. What we need to do is, after we add the keyboard listeners, is that we need to have what we typically call as being a game loop. And the game loop is just going to be it's going to be a method that we're creating, where what we'll do in here is it'll just be an infinite loop. We could have sort of as long as we win, as long as the game's not won or something like that, but essentially we'll just do a while true loop. And then inside of here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say rec.move, okay? And so it's going to be kind of moving a lot, right? Probably something that's even better than doing this, than having this game loop, would be for us to have a timer. So to kind of come back to the whole idea of the timers lab, right? We can have a private timer, game timer. And we'll go ahead and create the game timer here. We'll have it be some type of milliseconds, and then have it call this. We'll just do a game timer.start. Okay, and then this milliseconds will create another constant. That will not be an integer, and I'm going to probably say for right now, let's go ahead and do it every 100 milliseconds. So, 10 times a second, it'll kind of move 10. So it's going to be pretty fast. And again, we can change that afterwards. And then we also, because we also have to import, it's going to import Java. Import this one. So you can see it's now doing that. It's just that we have to now implement, like we had with the timers lab, right? We have to say implements action listener. And so here, right, rather than saying also arg0, arg1, we're going to do rec.move dx and dy. We're not going to necessarily have a game loop. Our game loop is actually going to be action performed. So we're going to do, it has to be public. Action performed. Action event E. Then we'll go ahead and take that part out as well as this one here. And then let's go ahead and indent everything correctly and then import action event like that, okay? And so, action performed is going to serve like our game loop that we were talking about originally, right? That had the while true loop, but really we don't want that to run at the speed that the computer's at. We want to kind of have it be something that every, 10 seconds is every, 10 times a second it's being called or something like that, to kind of give some time to be able to process what's happening. So let's see if this in fact works. Let's go ahead and run. And so at this point, I'll go ahead and just press the right key. Okay, and we can see that it's not working the way that we expect. Oh, actually, it is working the way that we expect, because now, if I'm holding it down, it actually keeps moving. It doesn't feel very smooth, but that's mostly because we're only calling this every 10 times a second. If instead of doing that, I end up, for example, maybe I'll keep that at 10, but maybe go down to 50 milliseconds. Yeah, I don't know what just happened there. Close that. Let me go back down over here. If we now have this, and then we now call it, we're now going to have something that's feeling a little bit better. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
How it's going back and forth, and now you can also see that there's not that initial delay that was there before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys see, like in the other one when we had it, right? When I switched this to sort of be, instead of it being dx and dy, right? If I was to instead say something like rec.move, and we'll just do it actually for the we'll say this is what we originally had, and then we have the same sorry, we had the same thing down here, right? So let's just I'll just comment out these for a second. So this is essentially the code that we had originally. When I run it this way,
You have them both as negative right now.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
run them like this. If you remember, as soon as I press down, you can see that there's that delay, right? After there is just there, but I'm holding down, I'm gonna press down here, and then you see that there's that delay that's going on there, okay? And so the way that we were able to get rid of that delay is to say, well, rather than us actually calling move here, we're gonna call move at a smooth rate. We're gonna call move every 20 times a second. And the way that we have the rectangle not move is we just say, well, we'll go ahead and set its dx and dy to be 0. And the only time that we'll have it move is when there's something interesting that happens, like we press the keys. Okay? Now, so how is this so far? Does this make sense to you all? That this causes it to have smoother movement. And what we're doing is we're kind of just calling this every 20 times a second. But what we'll do is we'll change the variables that are in here based off of the events that happen in key pressed.
It makes sense to me. What about you guys, Arisha and Vanessa?
I think I get it. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, because Sean has something like this. I think it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, let's keep going. So
I think this makes sense.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and then we'll go from there. Okay. So one thing is that you could be saying at this point, I want to like add some oomph to this, right? Because one thing that happens is when we end up running this, right? When we end up running this, we it's kind of just like a if you guys remember kind of Mario or one of these other ones, we almost want it to kind of float at the end. Do you guys agree with that? Like, have you played the Mario platformers where you kind of just you let go of the keys and then it sort of just gradually comes to a close?
Mm-hmm.
I think we would want to be able to do something like that. In order for us to be able to do that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to I don't think I have my see if I have that I can do that. No. In order to be able to have it sort of gradually come to a close, what we're going to want to do instead is rather than changing these to be 0, we're going to want to say once they release the key, go ahead and gradually start decreasing the dx variable. Okay, does that make sense to you all?
So like you don't want it to rapidly stop, rather come to a gradual stop?
Yeah, you want it to come to a gradual stop. And the way to make it come to a gradual stop is for us to kind of put in motion that when the key is released, we want to slowly decrement the dx.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and try and do that for VK right, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put something in here. And the way that I'm doing this again is crude, but it's more for you guys to understand the physics. I'm not saying that this is, the best way to be able to do this. I'm doing this more from an understanding standpoint. All right, so what that means is, and let's go ahead and do it with right? Rather than us saying, like, for example, if dx is speed, if dx is 10, really what we should be doing is we should be saying, well, kind of like go ahead and have dx minus minus or something, have something like that happen right when vk right is there. We don't necessarily want it to be 0. We just want it to start coming to a close. And so I would say that the one way to be able to do that is in move, okay? What we can do is, and again, I'm going to do this for the positive case because it's going to make it easier to understand what's happening. So we're just going to worry about the right for right now, and we'll come back and worry about the left. For the situation where it's the right, really what we want to do is we want to have something like maybe a slow down function. And what slow down is going to end up doing, so that every time that we're doing this action performed, we could potentially do a slow down, okay? And maybe what we do here is we have this slow down, and what I'm going to do is introduce a new variable, okay? That's called x acceleration. I'm going to call it xxl, okay? Also just going to initially set it to 0, okay? But what I might say is that I want x, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to, if we're going to slow down, what we want to do is we want to make dx be decremented by xxl each time, okay? So minus dx minus equals xxl. Right, so kind of every time that we do the slowdown, we're going to go ahead and just have that decrement what dx is, the value that dx has, okay? And then just to kind of help us out here, we'll do a math dot max, where we will, just in case dx ever goes negative, we don't want it to kind of continue. Actually, let's do it. Let's do it so that way you guys can see what happens. So we'll have this x acceleration. Now, if x acceleration is 0, nothing is going to happen. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Like nothing is going to happen here if x acceleration is 0. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. But what we can do is, and rather than kind of saying, I want you to go to a complete halt, one thing we can do is we could say, well, let me go ahead and rather than change dx, I'm going to make xxl equal to, let's say, 0.5. Okay? And so what that's going to do is that now when it becomes 0.5, we will, this will end up coming into motion, and then we'll be able to start using this for dx. Okay? And so again, I'm only worrying about the right at this point, and so we'll stick to that. All right? And so you're going to have to pay some attention here for this one. So when I hold down the key, he's going to end up going. But as soon as I let go, you see that he's actually starting to go back. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get him back. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So again, as soon as I let go, and so the reason that I wanted to do this first is because I think from this, think about what would happen at this point if you were, for example, to turn your screen 90 degrees. What does this look like to you?
Like jumping. Or the way that it slows down and then picks it back up.
Yeah.
Oh, like it's falling back down almost.
Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're kind of being pretty slow about it, and you can end up playing around with the acceleration. But yeah, this is, essentially this is like me doing a double jump, or, I could potentially keep jumping in this situation.
So
Yeah.
when you release the key, it's just falling on the left side?
Yeah. It's just falling to the left because again, because I'm releasing the code here, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're having this acceleration happen.
Yeah.
Right? I'm saying go ahead and set x acceleration to be 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so because x acceleration is 0.5 and we have this whole idea of slowing down, it's actually changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's subtracting the dx, right? It's subtracting. So initially, right, if our speed was 10, if dx is 10, right? Well, the first time that we go through this, dx will change to be 9.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then dx is going to be 9, then 8.5, 8, 8, 0, all the way until it gets to 0, right? Once it gets to 0, that's where you saw it kind of floated, right? And then at that point, it starts going into the negative territory, and it keeps going in that territory.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's essentially, I mean, that is, that's kind of jumping. It's both jumping and slowing down at the same time, right? If you notice, we could do all we need to do here for the slow down is I could end up having something that says, well, once you get to 0, I'll do it first as an if statement because I know that that seems to be more intuitive to folks. If dx is ever less than 0, right? We could just end up saying, well, go ahead and make my acceleration for x kind of become 0.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And so then if we do it this way, I'll say go ahead and make x acceleration 0, and then I'll also just kind of put dx back to be 0. So that way we make sure that we don't keep moving. So let me go ahead and show you that. And then now when I go ahead and move, you could see that he kind of floated to a stop. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Now with the left, right? The left is not doing that right now. And so we have, there's some things that we can end up fixing from that standpoint, but certainly this right one is working well. So questions about that?
I have a question, kind of, but I don't know if it might be better for me to wait and ask it later on.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, as to how you guys are feeling about it. But yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm like kind of curious, like about this kind of stuff. Where does it make the most sense in a bigger project to put all the physics stuff? Because I feel like you probably don't want it at the very top level, but
No, yeah, I would say that you want it in its own class.
mm-hmm.
Right? You want to be able to have it in its own class and just have something that ends up being essentially handling it. It would have maybe the list of the objects or something. It would be in charge of figuring out where things need to move to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I would think of you guys handling it. But I also think that it depends on who you're working with to know how much of an understanding it is, because I've seen different physics engines that work in lots of different ways, right? So some of them have almost tried to explain nothing about physics and just have things like, say, apply gravity on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the folks that are using them, they're like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I know that it's going to work like the real world kind of thing. And so they try and do as much as possible to make it easy for the other folks to be able to just use the system, right? But others are like, no, I think we should really try and uncover it because I don't want to necessarily try and support something that abstract. I would rather just, people end up knowing how to be able to change it because I don't want to necessarily be in charge of all of it, right? If there's someone else who wants something different, then we need to make sure that we add that in there. And so other people, I think, end up, making it more visible or more transparent. Give folks a little bit more access to that stuff. And so they'll just try and use more of the physics principles and have that be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's certainly one of these things where, especially on a bigger project, I would not put all of this stuff in the same file.
Professor?
Yes.
I have a question
Mm-hmm.
about the last part when we said if dx less than 0, then xl 0 and dx 0.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't notice any difference. Like if you click on the right side, isn't supposed to go at the same position where it was? Like I can draw it to make more sense.
Yeah. Go ahead.
For example, we have a box here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we have box here, and when you click on the right side, is this supposed to go back on the same position?
Oh yeah. So you're saying from like a jumping standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like how would we be able to do that? Okay, so the way to do that one, right? If you think about it, would be that you could end up instead of saying, like in this situation, all that's going to happen is you change the condition here, right? Here in this condition, we ended up saying, I don't want you to go back to the negative point, right? For the jumping part, and I'm going to essentially still do this going to the right side because I think you guys understand that the jumping is just with the y, right? It's the same physics. But so just to kind of get us to do this faster, what I'm going to do is exactly what you said, which is how do I get it to come back to the same spot?
Yeah.
So the way that we're going to do that is, and again, I'm only going to do this for the right at this point because the left we can do, it's just going to be a little more complicated, but I'm actually going to take, I'm going to actually comment that out for right now, or actually even take it out to kind of make it more simple. Yeah, so we have that, okay. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and in this situation, I'm going to make this a little bit different. I'm going to say, when the key is pressed, right? I want to, let's see, what do I want to do? Actually, yeah, when the key is pressed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable up here, okay? And I'm going to call it double original x, okay? Is that fair?
Yeah.
All right, so with original x, what's going to end up happening there is I can end up setting that, and what I'll do is I will set that in here, so that way you can end up noticing that it is going to be like ground. Okay, so in original x, I'm going to go ahead and say original x is this 100. So yeah, let me actually, yeah, let me move that up. Let's go ahead and just make this original x. And then hit this delete key over here. Okay. So all we have to do is for slow down, okay, all I have to do is, rather than check dx to see if it's less than 0, you know already that this is going to make things stop, right? So all I have to do is over here have a check that ends up saying something like, if my rect.get y, or get x, sorry, is less than original x. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop everything, and just to kind of make sure that we're in the right space, I'm actually going to set rect.setX. I'm going to set it back to original x. Okay, so that way I don't end up being in a situation, and I might talk about this with you guys in a second, but so that I'm not in a situation where, oh, I can't annotate. Yay! Yeah, let me bring it up in a second, and I'll do. So that I'm not in a situation. I think I have to say set location. Yeah, so original x, and then I'm just going to say rect.get y, so that I'm not in a situation where I'm like in the ground. Okay, so I'll make that point to you all in a second. So let's go ahead and try this again. So again, all I did was I changed this to say if my x coordinate is less than original x, then go ahead and set the location and kind of turn off my acceleration and my velocity. Let me go ahead and run that. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down the key, okay?
Okay, I see.
Okay. And so here, let me go ahead and annotate this real quick. Yeah, all right, so we have this kind of, our original x is like right there, okay? And when I end up, in like this time, I'm actually going to try and kind of come up all the way up here. Okay, and then see if it'll actually, because it's going to start going a lot faster, right? What we want to do, or we could be in a situation where because we are falling so fast, right? We could be falling so fast that we actually go kind of over this little thing because of the movement, right? We're saying move dx and dy. If let's say that my square is like right here. Let me change the color here. Let's say that my square is like right here, right? It's like at 201. It's like just above the thing. And let's say that my dx at this point is, let's say that my dx is like negative 20, okay? If that's the situation, and we're like in our x coordinate, we said that original x was like 100, yeah? If my current x right now, which is my rect dot get x, is say equal to 101, okay? We could get into a situation where it says, okay, the rect dot get x is not less than original x, so let me go ahead and move it by 20 pixels, right? If we move it 20 pixels, that means that, sorry, if we move it by 20 pixels, that means that it could end up over here. It could end up over here, right? That's probably like a 20 pixel difference. Do you agree with that?
Mhm.
And so what we end up doing in that situation is we end up saying, okay, if it did sort of pass where it's supposed to go ahead and just bring it back so that it's at this point
Okay.
and we're not kind of stuck all the way over here. Right? If I was at 101 and I'm about to do a move, rather than moving it to 80, right, bring it back to where it's supposed to be at 100. And so that's why you could see that it kind of lands there and doesn't necessarily pass.
Mhm.
Okay? Does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. And so again, this is pretty much what you would end up doing with jumping, except that you would end up using the space bar and you'd be doing this with dy.
Mhm.
Okay. Similarly, you would end up doing something if you wanted to provide some oomph, right? So that it would slowly start building up. You would use this idea of acceleration as well to start applying acceleration instead when they first press the key, right? So that rather than you immediately kind of having it be dx equals speed, you could, for example, make x, it's going to sound a little bit weird because of the way that we had this, but I think maybe what we'll do is we will change this from, rather than doing minus, we're going to do a plus here. We're going to change this to be a minus 0.5. And then here what we can do is we could say something like xxl equals 0.5. And so what this would allow us to do is that this would allow us to start slowly kind of going in that direction. Right, so that now that I end up holding down the key, you could see that he started to take off. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It took a little bit of time.
Mhm.
Okay. So that could be a way of also trying to do the walking, right? Or you would, we could end up doing the walking where he, slowly starts to kind of go in the direction that you want. And then he can kind of come to a stop. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can get fancier with this, right? You can end up having things like in your action performed, you can, for example, maybe clamp the acceleration so that it doesn't go past a certain point. right? So that it, rather than if I was to hold down the key for a really long time, right? That it would go infinitely fast. You can kind of say, okay, once you get up to a speed of 10 or an acceleration of 10, like that's enough. Like you shouldn't really have to do, or sorry, once you get to a dx of 10, like that's fast enough. I shouldn't necessarily go faster than that. And you can end up having those conditions all in sort of in the movement that you would have here. Okay.
Yep.
So I do want to, and so from a jumping standpoint, you did see that what I did was, rather than have an x acceleration, this is what you would do for walking. But, for this key pressed, right, we could just, have a dx, right? We can even have a Boolean here so that I couldn't do a jumping thing, right? We can also just have a state that says I'm jumping. So maybe what I can do is just have a Boolean, am I jumping? And then what I would have to do here is obviously set it to be, am I jumping as false? And here, right, I would say once they kind of press the key, jumping equals true. Okay. And sorry, maybe I should move that in here. Am I jumping equals true? And then, right, possibly when I slow down at this point is when I would set am I jumping back to be false. Okay. And so then what would happen here is that what I could do is I could say, if I'm jumping, if am I jumping, sorry, I'm going to rename this. I don't want to say am I jumping, I want to say I'm jumping. Okay. If I'm jumping, go ahead and return. Kind of just ignore anything, any input. And you guys can play with that how you want. But in this case, I'm just going to say, go ahead and ignore it. Otherwise, if it's false, and they are essentially jumping, go ahead and make jumping true. And then the only way that we'll be able to jump again is when we finally come back down. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So what this would allow you to do is that you would be able to, now by pressing the left key, okay, I'm trying to, you can hear me there trying to type, and I can't do any more jumping. Yeah, it's not until I get back to the bottom that I can then jump.
So it stopped at that point and cannot jump over?
Yeah, so it's that one jump that I have. I'm trying to do multiple jumps and I can't. You saw earlier that I was able to kind of have additional jumps or something. You guys can kind of decide how you want to be able to do that. If you want to be able to let them double jump or triple jump, you guys can decide how that works. But that's how you would end up preventing them from doing additional jumps. Okay. So that's how, that's your essential physics for a platformer. Really the only thing that's changing in these situations is what your if conditions are going to be, right? So here, this would be like completely stopping, but rather than having something like this, you can end up having things like you would have different conditions here for, am I colliding with something? Am I underneath a platform? Am I above a platform? That's the only thing that's really going to change what would end up happening in this situation, right? So for a platformer, right now we're kind of doing this thing where we're saying this is the ground, okay? If you were to if you were to, let's say, have a platform, let's say here, okay? If you were to have a platform there, you would want to think about, and this is again up to you guys whether you want to do the Mario style or whether you want to do other styles, right? What you would really want to focus on is to have a couple of points, like you did with the timers lab. And I'm just going to say something like, let's say that there's a point. We try and just make a. Did that work? You want to kind of pick maybe a point here, and at the simplest level, maybe a point here. It's not letting me. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so you want to pick a point. Sorry, you want to pick like this point just outside of the rectangle there, and you want to pick a point just outside of the rectangle or just outside of your character, like right there. Okay, and then you can end up taking a look at those 2 points. And if you end up colliding with anything, right? If you end up colliding with a particular platform or something, you can end up looking at one of those points and saying, did I like which of the 2 points did I collide with, right? Did I collide with the top or did I collide with the bottom? And which direction am I going in? Right? If I'm jumping upwards, if my dx is positive, meaning that I'm going in this direction, and let's say I'm getting this top one, then maybe that's going to allow me to go through the platform. But if I'm going negative, and it's the case that this point here is actually colliding with, for example, this plane over here, then maybe really what needs to happen is that I need to stop. Right? And so you can end up starting to come up with different conditions for how to be able to do that. Right? You can end up saying something like, if I'm going, in this direction, which means that my velocity is, my dx is positive, I'm not going to necessarily check anything. But if my dx is negative, I'm going to end up checking, my bottom point to see if I ended up hitting anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do, right, and if I do a get element at on this point down here, and I end up returning back a platform, then I know that I'm going to end up doing the stop code that you ended up seeing right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Other questions?
Also, if we want to jump and turn to the right, we just need to use jump and right key.
Yeah. So again, because you have, what I would do is with the key pressed, you would just have another key pressed here that ends up allowing you to do, jump and right. So actually what I'll do, just to make it, because I think at this point we have the jumping code. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So what I'll do is, I will call this VK space, okay? Because that's usually for, what we have here. We'll just we'll do VK space, and then I'm going to do is jumping is true, and then I'm going to do an Alt Shift R where I'm going to call this dy2, okay? And then I'm going to call this one dx. Okay. come back over here and call this dy. Okay. And then now what I'm going to do is just fix this one to have it be dx and dy. Hope that might end up working. What I did there was just rename the variables, right? So that we were mostly dealing with dy at that point. Oh, let me see. There's also floor y versus original x. So we want to be able to say here, say if it's less than floor y, set location rect.getX. And really what you would do is you would just combine these two. Let's make sure that the space is working correctly. All right, I did something wrong. Let's see. Let's call this y acceleration. Equals 10. Oh, yeah. So this one, the y is, it's going to have to be negative. So we're going to have to do this the other way. So that key released will end up causing it to increase. And dy is going to be negative. And the reason that it's got to be negative is because if you remember the way that the graphic sense of working is that your 0, 0 is up here. Do you guys agree with that? If our window, if this is our window here, our 0, 0 is up here, and y, so dy would normally be going downwards. And so for us to be able to have it jump, we want to be able to go this way, right? And then I think just to make sure, the other thing that I need to do is because of that, and we have our floor y here, our condition here also needs to change so that our get y needs to be greater than floor y, not less. All right, so those, a little bit more than I was expecting. I was hoping it was just going to magically work. Like that. So we'll just go ahead and there. Let's see if we have that. And there we go. Okay. And so you were saying to go left and right. Well, we can kind of reintroduce some of the same things that we had for going left and going right, right? So we had this thing where we talked about sort of just saying if e dot get key code equals key event ek left, right? And then we're just, I'm going to do the simple one and just make dx equal 10. Sorry, we're going to do the right one. And then when key is released, I guess I can introduce x acceleration just to kind of have it be the whole thing. 0, 1, 2. So we have that there. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, there's so many of this 10 here. We're going to just call that default speed. I think I did call that speed. This should also be the acceleration, but we want to default acceleration or something. We'll keep it. So if we're going to the right, we're going to just say xl equals 0.5. Okay, and then when the key is released, we will do get key code dot vk right. Say xxl equals -0.5. I think that's what we ended up having. And we would have a different condition here for slowing down, right? This is kind of what we would do for y. We're going to need to do something for x. So I would say if if dx is going to be less than 0, right, then we are going to do the whole xxl equals 0. And then you can probably see that at this point, it's like, hey, all of these parameters are pretty similar. So, oh, actually, I think that's all we need to do because we're not going to do any jumping. We're just going to hold there. So we'll just say if x is, if dx is less than 0, go ahead and make the x acceleration 0. And have that be there. And the last thing means that we're going to do dx plus equals x acceleration. Right, so all I'm doing is I'm kind of just adding in that other, this other part. At this point, maybe this shouldn't really be called slow down, but it should really be called maybe apply physics. And I think we should be good. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. We kind of have that, and then you can see that it is going left and right. So then I can maybe just jump, and then you could see that ended up going right. So I can do kind of fell off the screen there. So you can see that I just kind of got to a stop, and you guys can play around with the floatiness of the physics or whatever. You kind of saw that it went in midair. Maybe, you guys can decide how that goes, but you could see that it was just, that you have both things, and so you're able to do the jumping. And again, for the left, it would be similar things, just it ends up being a little bit more complicated with, having additional conditions and stuff. And so at that point, you might want to start thinking about, well, how do I make sure that, it ends up working, that I'm not introducing too many if statements everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so does that, so again, it's not everything, but it should be a good start. And I think those are the things that most people end up tripping up on. If you want to do things like frames or, having an animation or something, we can also talk about that as well. But really all I would have you do there is you would start thinking about having states about when people are, for example, jumping or running, or, running and jumping, and then changing images based off of where you are in that state counter.
That was kind of something that I had been thinking about as I was working on this the other day or yesterday. Because I was going to ask earlier, like, does it make more sense, like, for maybe not for our project because we don't have a lot of time, but like for something that you're working on for a long time, it makes sense to have like a moving state, a jumping state, like for every different type of, and kind of operating on those rather than just directly operating on X and Y. And
yes, no, it would. Yeah, it would. That's a much better way of doing it. But yeah, with the time that you guys have here, and because you really start getting into the whole idea of what to do in game programming or game engine programming, and especially specifically for platformers. And so since we're not necessarily kind of moving you towards that, it's more of you guys just working together on something to try and get it working. We just take the cruder approach. But yeah, no, absolutely. If this was a 10-week project versus a 3 or 4 week project, then having the different states would be a good way to go.
Okay.
Yeah. It still is a good way to go, but I'm not saying that it's something that you would need to do for this for this particular project. So other questions? And I mean, just to kind of help you guys again, to the kind of very crude approach, I'll just end up showing you here. So what I did was I just ended up having some images, and honestly, the only thing that I did was I ended up I have 2 frames,
Mhm.
and it's a little hard to see, but really all that's going on is that you know, you could think about it as like a stick figure. Okay, so if we have a stick figure like this, the way to make it sort of look like it's moving is this is one frame. In the second frame, I ended up moving the leg from where it is there to like here. In addition to that, I just moved this whole pixel. I moved everything 1 pixel down so that it looks like it's bobbing up and down a little bit. And yes, it's crude, but it ends up being fine. And I think if you guys give me a second, I need to get one more thing. Let me pause the recording for a second.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, wait, let me stop the share. Let me pause the recording. All right, so this is just you know, if you guys keep kind of working on the rules and stuff again, this is sort of fairly crude because but it has this thing where, you know, I ended up kind of putting this into a file where it ends up generating the map, and then you can end up seeing that that animation. See how the animation is kind of it
Are
kind
you,
of look.
are you sharing screen?
Am I sharing the screen? No. Okay, let me do that. I only pressed the record button, but I didn't share the screen. Oh well, sorry. I'm not gonna go back and edit that. All right. So you'll see here that this is, again, this is just a crude representation of something, you know, just kind of whipping up here, but you can kind of get the gist of it, right? So you could see that, you could see this little boss thing kind of, he's actually working on his own. He's deciding whether he wants to jump, move left or move right. And these are all just different little platforms that you can see here. And so, you know, in terms of kind of moving left or right, you can kind of see that there's just a little bit of kind of bobbing that's going on. Okay. And then all of the kind of switching that's happening, that's all just happening with a couple of images, though honestly, you could just probably do it yourself. But I was going for the, what is the, oh yeah, and then the other thing too is that when you end up moving to a particular place, right, a particular part of the screen, rather than you moving, you just move everything else on the screen so that it continues to kind of go in terms of the way that you want to, in case, you know, you can kind of go the way that you want to. So like, you know, so that, yeah, if I can kind of continue to move in one direction, you just move the rest. You move all the other elements, and then that's it, you know. And like I said, you end up having this thing where you check that bottom. So you saw there that I was able to oh, the other thing is oh yeah, I think I didn't end up using the platform thing, so you saw that I kind of am syncing a little bit more than usual, right? Right there, do you see that, how I'm like a little bit in the,
Yeah.
so that you just would end up, you know, setting it back to the x coordinate of the platform that you ended up colliding on or whatever. And I don't think I ended up having that. But when you, for the floor, I do have something like that. So you know, you don't ever necessarily get to a bad part or something like that. But yeah, you know, it's 4 images. You're just swapping back and forth between the 4 images, 2 for the left and then 2 for the right. And then it just kind of do the little leg thing. And again, it's not perfect or anything, but it's good enough for this class. Okay.
Okay.
So any questions?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Was this helpful?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. All right. Yay. All right. Well,
Thank you.
there you
Yeah.
go. And like I said, I'll upload it onto YouTube, so that way I can get two views over its lifespan. So I'll be happy. The adrenaline will start kicking in once I see view number 2. Like, yes. So yeah, excited about that. But yeah, I'll upload that and let you all know.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.